Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to Drums and Drams. My name is Cameron, and today we have another episode of Quick Sips. The focus of today's episode is going to be a sample sent in by Rick from Rhode Island, an incredibly generous patron of the channel. This is the Kilkerran 16-year Campbelltown single malt Scotch whiskey. As many of you know, Campbelltown Scotches tend to have a very distinct character. There are only a handful of distilleries in Campbelltown, 3 to be exact, and some of those distilleries have multiple brands underneath their umbrellas. But by and large, this is sort of the smallest little area still kind of hanging on in Scotland as far as the big regions go. It used to be a bustling area for Scotch whiskey, and now we're down, like I said, to only a handful of brands coming out of that region. But there is a distinct sort of funkiness, brininess, all of that kind of thing, and you know, varying levels of peat when you're talking about Campbelltown Scotch whiskey. So let's get into it here. I have the sample of the Kilkerran 16 right here. I've already spent just a little bit of time with this one, so let's pour out the rest of this sample and let's get into it. All right, so a couple of stats here for this sample. 46% ABV, which is pretty nice ABV for a 16-year-old single malt. The blending here is 98% ex-bourbon casks and 2% madeira. So just a little hint of madeira finishing going on in here. I'm sure whoever blended this found that added a very subtle nuance that really helped this thing out. So I'm excited to give this another go today. Let's see what we get on the nose. Oh yeah, so that familiar Campbelltown sort of salty, briny type thing. Yeah, just a very slight hint of peat in the background, but really the peat is kind of blending with the minerality in here. So it's almost sort of an afterthought, but there's definitely a very mineral note in this Scotch. Yeah, so I've talked about saltiness, talked about minerality. There's a really great tart, sour, citrusy zest going on. I would call this like a lemon zest that really sits on the top, but there is a distinct sour fruit note in this Scotch too. Wow, yeah, very sweet as well, like some nice like vanilla confectionery notes on the top. Basically, this just has a lot of different categories of aromas going on here. Mineral, saltiness, sour, sweet, really all of those kinds of things, and that little hint of smoke in the background. Yeah, it's covering a lot of bases. It smells amazing. So let's see what we get on the palate here. Cheers. Ooh, yeah. Wow. You know, for 46% ABV, this thing is not, how do I say it? It's not crazy viscous or anything, but it is a very dense and heavy mouthfeel. Like, obviously, at a higher ABV, this thing would be kind of attacking your palate and everything like that. This just blossoms in a very good way, and it feels heavy, you know, on the palate and everything like that. Really just an incredible sort of experience from front to back there. I'm gonna have to take another sip to really get into it. But all of those components from the nose seem to be here on the palate. All of those varied categories of aroma that I got seem to be on the palate. It's a really great development there. Yeah, so right away, as soon as it hits your palate, before you even swallow, I get met with a lot of those very sugary sweet vanilla confectionery notes, along with that lemon zest and that sort of bright citrus sour type note that I talked about. As soon as you swallow, there's a rush of really great oak spice, along with that very light peat and that minerality that sort of blossom up in the mid palate. There's also this great floral quality to this whiskey as well. As it fades now into the finish, that sourness returns. It sort of turns a bit tannic, a bit drying, sour, all of that kind of stuff. And now that we're sort of away from the finish, the lingering quality in the mouth is this combination of sweet and sour. There's a light spiciness that sits in the back of the throat. not a terribly long finish, but it's something I would call an appropriate finish. It from front to back, 46% ABV, given the 16-year-old age, which tends to mellow, some of these things out just a bit, some of these sharper characteristics. It's a very appropriately blended and constructed single malt. I really, really like this stuff. It combines some of those citrus qualities and sweeter qualities that you get in, say, a Glenmorangie that, someone who wants a bit of a sweeter Scotch would appreciate. But it also has enough of that Campbelltown punch and salinity and minerality that someone who prefers a slightly peated or moderately peated Scotch would also really appreciate this. It's almost the best of both worlds. So I've got to say this Kilkerran 16 is an absolute standout in my book. I mean, I really, really enjoy this. Of course, I would love to see it at a higher ABV, wouldn't we all? But where it sits now, it's a very, very enjoyable sipper, and I really, really enjoy it. I'm not sure exactly the MSRP on this one. I know some of these Campbelltown single malts can get pretty pricey. So, in my book, if this does fall in line with other 15 to 18-year-old single malt scotches, you're thinking about anywhere between $85 to $125. I would pick this thing up. It's really, really, it's done very well. And so I enjoy the fact that it ticks a lot of different boxes, but it still doesn't seem too spread out or too confused. It feels like it's a very well-paced single malt when you do get it on the palate and experience all that development. So highly, highly recommend. That's all I've got for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button. I do have a Patreon page. If you're interested in supporting the channel further, you can learn more about that with a link in the description below. But otherwise, I am going to get on now to recording some more content. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you, Rick, for sending in this sample of Kilkerran 16. Highly enjoyable and highly recommend. So cheers, and I'll see you next time on Drums and Drams.